Okay, so we're going to create the backend now so that we can create the database, and then when we add an import onto here, we create a post method so that when we press the add button, we have a post method that creates a new to do, and then that would add onto the database. So if we go onto mongodb.com/atlas and click on try free for a new database, if you already have one, you can just log in or you can sign up with Google. So because I already have one, I'm just going to create a database. So if we go on database on the left and then click build a database, there is a free plan which I will select and create and leave all the settings as they are and create the cluster like so. So this will take a couple of minutes to set up. So what I want to do now is outside of the to do front end, we are going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this one to do backend. And I also want to create a new terminal for the backend. So if I go onto my new terminal and cd into to do backend, I now want to initialize a new project within here. So if I type in npm init, I will get a series of questions. So the package name is to do backend, enter, the version is correct, the description is correct, the entry point will be server.js, enter again, the Git repository, enter, ignore, no keywords. You could put your name in here, so my name Imran in the author, enter again, is this okay? Yes. So now what will happen is in the backend we will have a new file created, so the package.json file. And because the main file now will be the server.js, I now want to create that file. So server.js, and there are a few packages that I want to install also. So we are having a Node backend, and we are going to be using Express. So install npm I express Mongoose, which will connect our backend to the database. We want to have cause and .env, which we will explain later on. So if I install all of them dependencies, and now if I go back onto my Mongo database, I now want to first off create a user. So this is going to be myself, Imran, and auto generate a secure password. I'm going to copy the password, which is very important, and then create the user. What I also want to do is we want to, on IP addresses, we want to add my current IP address. So now I have access in the database access. I want to also have network access. So this I am going to allow access from anywhere, which is not recommended, but it basically means that anyone can access this. So if I confirm, and then if I go into my database access, I have the user created here. And back in my database, I now want to click connect and connect your application. And the password that I copied, I want to paste that in. For now, I will just paste that in here. This is not recommended to share. I will delete this later once this application is complete. So please follow the steps and use your own. And now if I copy the string also, and then where it says password, we want to insert our own password inside. So password like so. So in my server.js file, there are a few things that I also need to import. So because Node.js uses all the syntax, we now are, instead of having the import like we do on the React front end like this, we are going to instead say const express. So this is the package that we added from npm is equal to require of express. I'm also going to have mongoose. So mongoose, which is equal to require of mongoose. I'm just going to copy this twice again, paste that in. So this one is going to be cause that will be lowercase, and then we are also going to have .env. And first off, I'm going to initialize the .env.config. I'm going to first off lay out what I'm going to do. So app config is going here. I also need the middlewares. So this is things like when we need to convert the data into JSON, and we also need the DB config, and finally the API endpoints that we will have. So the create, read, update, and delete methods will go here. So API endpoints. So first off, we're going to initialize the app. So const app is equal to express. So we're initializing express. So that's our app. We're going to create a port. So const port, which is equal to process.env.port. So we do need to create an env file, which I will create in just a moment. So port is process.env.port, otherwise 8000 if the port's not there. So if I create a new file, .env, and in here I'm going to have a port of 8000 also. So now our server.js has access to the .env, which we initialized up here. So now if I save all, I now need to create a connection URL. So connection URL, which is equal to process.env.mongo underscore URI. So the URI is going to be this string here. So if I cut that out, go into my env file, and mongo underscore URI is equal to our connection, which we have here on the left. So if I close that down, so now we should have a connection onto the database. So now that I have defined the app config, I also need to add the middlewares on here. So I want to convert everything to JSON. So convert to JSON, which will be app.use. And within here, I'm going to pass in express.json, which converts everything for me as a middleware. And what I also need to add is to manage the headers. So app.use of cause. And if you want to know further about cause, if you just look at the package, so that's the middlewares complete. Now for my DB config, I'm going to connect to Mongoose. So mongoose.connect, and in here, I'm going to pass in the connection URL that I have passed. And then I am also going to have a .then method. So this will return a promise. And in here, in the .then, I'm going to pass in a callback, which will listen to the port. So app.listen. And what we are listening for is the port, which we have defined up here. So if I just copy that as the first argument, and then again a callback, which we will console log. And then we're going to have template literals, so that we will have running on port, and then we will pass the port number in here. So port like so. So if all is well, we should see this message console log of running on port 8000, it should be. And we also want to handle errors, so .catch. And in here, I'm going to pass in an error. Again, callback. And within here, I'm just going to console.log whatever error is returned from here. So to test that the connection is working, I should expect to see running on port 8000. So if I run the backend, so node server.js, so I want to run the file within the backend folder called server.js. So this file will run, and then we will eventually make the connection to the MongoDB URL. And then once we've done that, we will have the console log of running on port, and it should be 8000 from the process env.port or the 8000. So if I press enter, we now have running on port 8000, and I have also got the localhost set up as 8000. So now what we want to do is create the API endpoint. But before we do that, we are going to create a schema for the to-dos, which is basically a structure of how we want to send the to-dos to the back end, and how we also want to fetch the to-dos from the back end. So now we're going to create the schema or the structure of the back end. So if I close the front end folder, and in my back end, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to name it dbtodos.js. So this will be the structure or the schema, as they call it, of what I'm going to pass in my to-dos. So what I need to make the connection is Mongoose, so const Mongoose, which is equal to require Mongoose. So, and I'm going to create a constant of to-do schema, so const to-do schema, which is equal to mongoose.schema. So, and in here, I'm going to have a couple of objects. So within the object, I'm going to have an object called text. So this is going to be the text that we create on the input. So whatever is in here, we want to pass into the database. So the text is going to have a type of string. So this will be a text, a string always. And we will also need this to be required. So required as true, put that in there. And what we're going to do is just copy this. Instead of text, I'm going to have a Boolean value of completed. So has the to-do been completed? So this will be a Boolean of true. So we'll have just two objects in the schema. So the text and completed. And just finally, we also want to have timestamps in there so that we can order it or sort it by the date. So an object again of timestamp with an S of true. So this will add to the database also. So now we have created the to-do schema. We now also need to export it. So normally we would do the export default, but because it is in Node.js and an older backend environment, we are going to do it the older way. So module.export, which is equal to mongoose.model. And I'm going to name this model to-dos as the first argument, and then the second argument is the model we're going to pass across, which is the to-do schema, like so. So now if I save, we have that set up. So what I also am going to do is create a controller. So this will handle all of the API endpoints as the second argument. So now that I have created my to-do schema, I'm going to create all the CRUD methods using this schema. So I'm going to create a new folder in the backend. This will be called controllers, like so. And within controllers, I'm going to create a new file named to-do controller.js. So now if I go into my server.js file, I now want to create my endpoint. So first endpoint will be get to-dos list. I will have also the create a new to-do. We will also have the update a to-do. And just finally, we will have delete a to-do, like so. So in here, the first one is going to be app.get, and the endpoint that we want to get is /todos, like so. And then in my controller file, the second argument is normally a callback function, which we will create in the controller file just to make the server.js file lightweight and neat. So what I will call this callback function is get to-dos, like so, and we will import this from the to-do controller.js file. So if I just copy this and paste this in each time, so instead of app.get this time, so to create a new to-do, we will do app.post, and we will post the to-dos to the /todos endpoint, and the callback argument will be create to-do with one S, like so. We also want to update an individual and delete an individual to-do, so the endpoints will be /:id. So we want to essentially get the ID that we click on, and we want to delete that from the entire to-dos list. So this will be app.put, and I'm going to name this one update to-do with singular to-do, and the same with this one will be app.delete, which will also be named delete to-do, like so. So at the top, after the .env config, I also want to import these methods. So if I import these, which is equal to require of ./controllers/to-do controller.js. So essentially, we're going to export these methods here from the to-do controller.js and import them into the API endpoints as a callback function. So I'm just going to copy these across. So get to-dos, create to-do, update to-do, and finally delete to do. So now we have the server.js file complete. All we need to do now is create these callback functions in the to-do controller, and then that will be the backend portion of the app complete. So if I go into to-do controller.js, and in here we need two packages. So we need Mongoose once again. Mongoose equals require Mongoose. And we also need the schema that we created. So const to-dos, I'm going to name this one, which is equal to require of the go up a level into db to-dos. So now we have access to the schema portion. I'm just going to paste in the names of what we are going to create here. And whilst we're at it, I'm going to export these. So module.export is equal to an object which will take in the following functions. And now we just need to create the function. So first off, the callback function that I want to create is get the to-dos list. So I'm going to name this const of get to-dos, which is what we named it in this file and the server.js file. So I want to get the to-dos. So I'm going to give it an async function. So in this function, you get a request and a response. And I'm going to give it a callback. And within the async function, I'm going to give it a try catch block. So a try and then a catch, like so. And what I want to do is create the to-dos. So const all to-dos, or get the all of the to-dos, which is equal to await to-dos dot find. So this is a method from MongoDB to find all of the to-dos. So await to-dos dot find, which is equal to an empty object. So find all of the to-dos, and we also want to sort these with the newest going to the top. So sort, and in here I'm going to get an object. So within the to-do schema, so if I go into here where we have selected timestamps of true, what gets added onto here is something called created at, and we want to get the created at as -1 so that the new to-dos are there always at the top. So now that we have the to-dos, all to-dos declared, I want to get a res.status of 200, res.status of 200, which means it's a success, dot send. And what we want to send is all of the to-dos. So that way we have access to all of the to-dos. And in the catch block, I forgot to put the error in. So when we have an error, essentially what we want to do is the same thing, but instead we give it a 400 error, and we want to pass in the error dot message. So now if I save, I now have the get to do list set up. So now we can access the get to dos. We just need to copy this and underneath paste, but this time we want to create a new to do, and the method is going to be called create to do. We get a request and a response once again. So now we want to get the to do that we are passing across. So const db to do. So within the request, we get access to the body. So we want to pass in the new to do into the database. So within the try catch block, I'm going to name this one new to do, which is equal to await to-dos dot create, and in here I'm going to pass in the db to do. So essentially we are creating whatever gets passed in from request.body into the new to do, and then what we are again going to do is pass in a 2 or 1 this time to say we have successfully created a new to do. And for the error, I'm just going to change this to a 500 error. So that we have got a to-do and created a to-do also. So now all that's left is to create the update to-do and the delete to-do. So I'm just going to, again, copy this. But the update and delete are slightly different. So I'm just going to change this to update to-do. And I'm going to give it a constant of update to-do, like so. But to find the right to do, we need to get access to the individual ID that we click on. So on here, we're going to get access to the params object within request. So request.params.id, but I'm just going to destructure the ID from request.params. So within the request params, we're going to get the ID that get passed in. So if we go back into our server, we get an ID parameter here within the request.params. So this ID within the try block, I'm going to check first of all if it is a valid ID. So and then this is where we have access to mongoose types object ID dot is valid. So basically what this does is it checks if the destructured ID is valid. So what we want to do is check if it's not valid. So just give it an exclamation mark beforehand. If it's not valid, then we want to return a response.status of 404.send. So we want to send the response of 404, and this will say there is no to do with the ID of, and then just pass in the ID here and give this some template literal backticks. Okay, and then just fix this and just close it off here. And if that check passes, then we want to update the to-do. So what I want to do is essentially check the ID is valid, like so. Okay, and then once the ID is valid, we want to get access to the to-do ID. So to-do ID, which is equal to underscore ID of ID. So the underscore ID is from MongoDB. That's how they name their IDs. So that's the structure it always is for each individual ID that we have. And then the ID that we have is going to be equal to the rec.params.id here. So once we find that, we want to update. So const update is equal to, if we look into our DB to-dos, we want completed to become true. Initially, it will be false because we haven't completed the to-do. So we want to access the completed key here, and we want to now set that to true. Now we have declared both variables that we need. I want to change this to these both to update to do, like so. And instead of to-dos.create, we want to do to-dos.find one and update, which is this method here. And what we want to pass in as the first argument is the to-do ID. So we want to find the to-do ID from the params object, and then the payload that we want to update with is the update. So we want to toggle complete to true, like so. Then what we want to do is do an extra check. So if there isn't an update to do, then we want to return the same check here as well. So res.status of 404, no such, there's no to do with the ID of the ID. Otherwise, we want to send res.status of 200, like so. Again, passing in the update to do. And just finally, the last method is the delete to do. So if I change the update to actually all of them to delete, let's do it one by one. So delete to do, and that's a lowercase d. Again, we are getting access to the ID from the params. We are going to check if this is a valid ID. I don't need the updates. We don't need these anymore. So if we just delete them, and we want to declare a delete to do. So instead of find one and update, this will be find one and delete. So, and the one that we want to find and delete is within the object of underscore ID equal to the ID that we pass. So that's what we want to delete. And we don't need the if check here. We just need to pass it in the deleted to do as a 200 status here, and then we've passed in the deleted to do. So now, if we save all, we have the backend all set up and complete. So we have the schema set up, we have the server JS file, which has the API endpoint set up, and we have the connection to the MongoDB database with Mongoose, and we have set everything up as we need. What we now need to do is on the front end, make API requests to the local host of 8000 and build out the rest of the front end.